Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now today, I want to explore the topic of identity management. And yes, I know many organisations out there see current identity access management solutions as just incapable of meeting the demands of scalability, performance and security and all those things that they need in the work from anywhere era. So what can be done to solve this identity management crisis that's experienced by organisations all over the world? Well, today I've invited Wade Ellery, Senior Solution Architect at a company called Radiant Logic, to join me in discussing how organisations have an identity management crisis already without even realising it, and also what they can do to solve the problem. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way stateside, where Wade Ellery is waiting to join us in conversation today. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Wade. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
My name is Wade Ellery. I'm the Vice President of Solutions Architects at Radiant Logic. My job basically is to work with our customers and prospects to understand the challenges they have around identity management, and then explaining how Radiant Logic can help address those challenges.
Fantastic. And I always like to learn more about my guests. So the question I always like to open on is, how did you get here? What is your origin story? And what lit the spark in you for that passion in technology?
My original degree was in biophysics from UC Berkeley. I used to do radiation research on cell DNA repair processes. And I was a little too sterile inside the lab. I needed to interact with a few more people. So I went out and actually taught myself how to sell and sold for a number of years. And that led to a need to get back into technology, to have a little more analytics in my job. And I got a great combination now where I'm doing very technological work. I'm working with complex systems and big problems, but I'm also working with people every day. So it's been a great combination.
What a great mix there. And of course, it was that path that led you to Radiant Logic. And for people that are hearing about you for the first time, can you just tell the listeners a little bit more about what Radiant Logic is and the kind of problems that you're solving for your customers?
So Radiant Logic has actually been in business for 20 years. We were the brainchild of our founder, Michel Prompt, who at the time he started the company, saw a real challenge with data locked inside databases that was really information that needed to be leveraged for authentication and authorization, for identity activities, for letting users get access to the resources they needed to do their jobs. And the ability to transform that information locked into databases into a directory infrastructure, into a more usable and compatible format was really the impetus for the organization. Now, what he found was over the years, and what we've run into, and a lot of this has been driven by our customers saying, this is wonderful. If you could solve this problem too, it'd be even better, is that our customers' identity data, the information they use every day to decide if a person is who they say they are and what access that person should have and how they prevent a bad actor from getting into their systems and doing bad things, all that information is scattered throughout a large organization and scattered in many different platforms, not just databases and directories, but now it's in the cloud. It's in different applications, it's in different APIs and backends and flat files. And to really be able to leverage that information and be effective in the world of identity management, you have to bring all that information together, which is what Radiant Logic does. We scoop all that information up, and then we allow you to correlate it and aggregate it and mix it and manage it and manipulate it so that it's valuable and actionable and can then be used in multiple different scenarios to support your access management, single sign-on, to support your governance, to support your privileged account management, your risk management. And with the advent now of three things, zero trust, which is really driving access authorization around attributes, that really detailed information about the user. And then the digital transformation, the customer identity management, where I need to know a lot about my customer to be able to support that customer and give him very good, seamless, frictionless experience. All those are driven by a need for identity management. And now we're moving to the cloud. So this is scattering that information even further. So the requirements and the benefits of Radiant Logic have really exploded in the last 5 years. And we're seeing a lot of customers coming to us now realizing that they need this foundational layer before they do anything else in the identity management space.
And one of the big reasons I invited you on the podcast today was to discuss how so many organizations out there have an identity management crisis on their hands now without even realizing it. So can you expand on the scale of this problem?
Yes, it's a very large scale. And if you look at most of the headlines where organizations are compromised, where a ransomware attack is successful in penetrating the organization, where I have to go back in now and reset my passwords for the third time this year because Google tells me that they've been found on the dark net because one place I put them got compromised. All that goes back to identity security. All that goes back to how effectively are the companies you work with, that you interact with, businesses that you do your business with, how effectively are they managing identity information? And you can kind of get a pulse for the industry by just looking at the amount of compromises and challenges out there from a security standpoint. Even now, if you look at the current conflict in Ukraine, one of the things the US government is telling American businesses is steel yourself for cyber attacks. Well, that's done at the identity management layer, but we have a lot of exposure there because there's a lot of identity debt, IT debt. There's a lot of platforms that have not been properly configured. They've not been matured. They've not been integrated completely. There's a lot of projects that never delivered on the full pace and scope of what they were trying to overcome. And so you have challenges where the intention to deliver a certain amount of security was there, but the execution wasn't successful. And it really starts with being able to see what you have today. That's one of the things Radiant Logic is very good at. When you connect to everything, when you bring it into Radiant Logic, you have visibility now to where information is, the quality of that information, how actionable that is, how accurate that is, and how much you need to clean it up. That's the first step on any process, is really to discover what you have and then the tools that you need to start moving that forward.
And I suppose the big question for any business leader listening today is how can their business identify that they have a problem like this? What are the telltale signs?
Simple things like if I did a simple audit on my Active Directory, how many accounts do I find for people that have left the organization that are still there? Or how many accounts are still active in Azure, Office 365, or in Okta, or in ServiceNow long after people have left the organization? One of the first things auditors started looking at years ago when Sarbanes-Oxley and all the other requirements for auditing IT infrastructure became more solidified was orphaned accounts, accounts where people have left and the access is still there. Because that's a doorway to a bad operator to be able to get access to the system and have all day to try and compromise that account because no one's watching it. No one's using it every day and no one's recognizing there's something there that's a challenge. And then just simply look at something even easier, the number of groups you have relative to the number of people in your organization. Commonly, and this is almost a comical conversation in the rooms with our prospects and customers, if you're a 10,000 user company, you have 12,000 groups. If you're a 100,000 user company, you have 120,000 groups. There's this exponential magical growth of groups that seems to parallel, everybody gets one. But that's not really what groups were designed for. So what you have there is evidence of a real sprawl in your access management and authorization fabric, but a lack of control and visibility because you wouldn't leave that much unattended if you actually had a way to manage it.
And assuming that a business is able to successfully identify that they've got that problem, where do they then begin to solve it? Can you expand on how organizations can use identity data fabric to solve that identity sprawl program you just described?
Oh, definitely. And what I want to say is we've done much better as an industry now in the last 5-10 years of describing that this is a journey. It's not an event. It's not a single project. It's eating an elephant, and you eat an elephant one bite at a time. So you really want to start to look at your organization holistically and see how much information you can gather in the first cut, but you're not going to be able to get everywhere and get everything. That was one of the drawbacks of our history as an identity management industry, is we promised this magic easy button that would solve all your problems. And identity is far more complicated than that. So what you want to do is you want to gather this information from as many places as you can connect to easily in your first round and start to correlate that data. Correlating the data is critical. Understanding that Neil exists in Active Directory, he exists in ServiceNow, he exists in Salesforce, but he has a different identifier. He has a different SAM account name, a different user ID. It's not obvious that it's Neil in every one of those systems, but it is Neil, so we need to bring that information together. But if I have two SAMs in the system that are not the same person, I need to make sure I don't join those accounts together either. So we're building up this profile that allows me to go one place now and see everywhere that Neil has an account in the system and be able to then pull into that account all the attributes, all the access management, all the governance, all the groups, all the properties of that account. And then we take that information and we feed that to the components of the identity management stack. So if you think of a symphony, the violins are one part of the identity management platform, the horns are another, the woodwinds are another, percussion's a fourth. These are all components within identity management that work together to secure your organization, but they're very different. Access management operates completely differently than governance or privileged account management, but they all rely on the music that's composed for them to play their part of the symphony to make a song that sounds good together. You don't want to listen to a symphony warm up for an hour and a half. You want to listen to them actually play something powerful and strong and cohesive. And this is where Radiant Logic comes into play. The identity data fabric is that composed music, is that gathering of all the notes, is the structuring of the symphony, and then delivering each of the components in that symphony the part they need, giving the access management system a big flat list of users so it can very quickly find and authorize every user, giving the governance platform a normalized set of data, the individual identifier, so that all the different places Neil exists are easy for them to correlate together, giving the privileged account management a full range of the account that a person has, both privileged and unprivileged, so a complete profile can be understood. So Radiant Logic's identity data fabric feeds the notes, feeds the music to the symphony, and together we get Don Giovanni or Beethoven's Fifth. It's amazing.
Wow. And I'm curious, on top of that, has the digital transformation of everything exacerbated the current identity management problem that organizations have, or is it much the same as it has been for several years?
It's really become a bigger challenge. If you look back at the pre-COVID era, commercial companies were starting to recognize that in the US, Esurance was a very competitive online-only insurance company, and the old brick and mortar companies were losing market share to what appeared to be faster, easier, and slicker. Amazon was taking business away from brick and mortar organizations. So there was a recognition that you needed to be able to compete in that digital world. But when COVID struck and everyone was remote and people were ordering everything online and things were being delivered, that really drove that whole experience forward. And now every user out there, mom and pop, who really didn't spend any time on the internet at all, were out trying to use the internet. And it became very acute as to whether or not the experience for that user was seamless, was complete, was not frustrating, gave them the access and the information that they needed. So that digital transformation was really accelerated. And what we found was that what users, customers are looking for is they're looking for easy log on. So I can log in once and get access to everything that I do with that particular insurance company or that retailer or that medical company. And I can actually get all the information I need entered once in the system, and then it's used over and over again. I'm not asked repeatedly for the same data. And the information that's shared with me is relevant to my needs, to my profile, to my interests. All that is driven by information about the customer that has been pulled out of multiple disparate legacy systems, usually databases, usually disconnected platforms, to build that holistic view of the customer, to deliver that experience. And this, again, is where Radiant Logic has been very powerful, because we can connect to all those sources of identity information, lift that forward, correlate that together to build a complete customer profile, and then provide it to whatever platform that company is using to start to do their digital transformation.
And I suspect you're the kind of company that's always got one eye on the future and what's coming next. So on that side of things, are there any particular trends that you're monitoring at the moment, or any trends that particularly excite you and how they'll impact the future or the road ahead?
Well, one that I actually think is very exciting for me is, and it's a buzzword that's been around for a while, but why it's a trend that I have an eye on for the future is that it's actually starting to mature into something real. And that's the concept of zero trust. The idea that I can actually have a user authenticate to my system, provide credentials, provide a smartphone certificate, some model or method to verify their identity, but I don't let them do anything in my system until I authorize that. And I authorize that access in the moment based on everything I know about that user. Is he inside my building? Is he on one of my machines? Is he a trusted employee? Is he not done anything nefarious in the last 3 months? All these combination of factors can be used to make a more valid decision about whether or not I should give him access to the financial general ledger. It may be completely reasonable because he is a person in the accounting department that has that level of access and has been reviewed and attested to, and that's reasonable. Or he may be coming in from a jailbroken iPhone from a Starbucks hijacked Wi-Fi connection at 2:00 in the morning. And maybe now that's not a reasonable thing for me to do. So what we're seeing is an integration now of the applications actually being able to look outside to ask a policy information point, ask a decision point. Hey, is it reasonable right now that Neil gets access to this resource he's inquiring about? Given all you know about Neil at the moment, where he came from, what he's doing, what he's on, environmental things like location and time of day, but also what's his current risk score? What's the risk score of the asset he's trying to access? When's the last time he was audited? What's his group memberships? All those factors go into play to answering that question in real time for the application. So what we're seeing now is the DevOps groups, the people who write these applications inside these organizations, start to actually build smarter applications that can ask those kind of questions and start to leverage this rich set of data that we have at Radiant Logic to really incrementally or generationally boost the level of security in a system and tighten down access in a way that is seamless to the user, but offers us a much higher level of protection.
Incredibly cool, man. And I love what you're doing here. And what's next for you? What is your focus at Radiant Logic? Is there anything you can share about what you're working on right now? And especially not just now, but for the future as well?
Yes, basically one of the big things that we're working on right now is we're working on a cloud hosted version of Radiant Logic as a service. Traditionally, we've deployed in the customer environment, in their data centers, in their cloud environment, Azure, AWS, Google, because the information that we were consuming was very close to their infrastructure. So we were sitting with their infrastructure. But now we're looking at expanding the flexibility of Radiant Logic and making it easier and simpler for people to get the benefits of having Radiant Logic in their environment. You don't have to be a 50,000 user company with a tremendous amount of legacy or infrastructure databases and directories to start to get the value of Radiant Logic today. And making it available as a service, simplifying the integration logic even more. And this is all done today with wizards and a mouse. This is not a coding platform. This is an out-of-the-box, ready-to-go solution. Making this even easier for people to get up to speed on broadens the market tremendously, because the security market is driven by basically the least secure person on the block. The large companies will tighten themselves up and the bad actors will go down a rung to the less fortunate companies that don't have as much budget or as much experience, and they'll prey on them. So with Radiant Logic being able now to address a larger market, we can bring this level of control, visibility, and security to a much broader set of organizations, and I think provide more value overall.
Well, you've certainly given me lots to think about, and I suspect everyone listening. But we've now reached the fun part of the show. And before I let you go, I always ask my guests to leave everyone listening with a personal touch of inspiration by maybe sharing a book that has inspired them, or a song or piece of music, or anything at all. What will you leave us with today? And is there a story to accompany your choice?
Wow, that's one I hadn't thought about. I think, it's a poem that my wife wrote in calligraphy for me when I was starting out in my career. And I will let people Google the poem to find the whole text because I haven't memorized it. But it starts out with, until one is committed. And when the gist of the poem is that when you commit to something, when you put your heart and soul into it, when you put all of your eggs in that basket, then the heaven and earth moves to support your commitment. Things happen outside of your control. The world aligns to help you succeed when you put that much of yourself into anything. And I look at my career, I look at the people that I work with, I look at people I've known over the past 3 decades in this space. And there's a level in our industry of real joy in providing quality and providing value and helping people and understanding that we make a difference. And the level of commitment that people have to delivering that, to leaning in and really doing what's necessary to make something happen, whether it's building a company from nothing or making sure that the customers are extremely well taken care of, or all the pieces that go to that. I would say again, Google until one is committed, you'll get the whole text. It's inspiring. And for me, it was a real shift where I realized where I have committed and where I haven't committed is a whole different experience. And that's a power that you have every day to make a choice to do that.
Wow, absolutely love that, and echo the sentiments of that poem. And I'll look that up and put it in the show notes for people to check out as well. But before I let you go, for anyone listening, just wanting to find out more information about everything we've talked about today around identity management and also the work you're doing at Radiant Logic, what's the best starting point, especially if they want to contact your team as well?
Well, actually, the best way around the world to get a hold of us would be radiantlogic.com.
Yeah.
There are multiple resources there. There's a lot of information. There's also multiple touch points where you can request to be contacted. You can go through webinars that we've done and get real full presentations about the product that we've done with our customers and analysts around different parts of the challenge around identity management. So that's a very rich set of information there. I would start there. If you are going out into the world this year, if you're going to be going to a conference, look for Radiant Logic. We go to a lot of conferences. If you happen to be at Kippinger Cole or Gartner in Europe, anything in the US, stop by our booth, come and see us. Let us know ahead of time that you're going to be at the conference so we can even schedule some face-to-face time in one of our meeting suites, because the opportunity to sit down and understand what the world needs, what our customers are looking for is the best use of our time, and it's a part of the job that I love the most. So I look forward to actually meeting people whenever possible.
Oh, I love that. And I think you've also succeeded today in busting a lot of myths that organisations may have had around current identity access management solutions. And maybe they thought they were incapable of meeting the demands of scalability, performance, and the security needed to work from anywhere as people are doing now. So you've certainly busted that and also provided a solution on what can be done to solve this identity management crisis that are being experienced around the world. And I often go to conferences around the world, so as things open back up, maybe me and you can have some face-to-face time and a chat over a cold beer maybe, but more than anything, just thank you for joining me today.
Well, I look forward to that, Neil. And again, thank you very much. I appreciate your time and I appreciate your audience. Thank you.
For so many organisations, identity data exists in multiple forms across different locations, such as LDAP, Active Directory, SQL, web services, etc., all of which creates a fragmented infrastructure within the organisation, ultimately resulting in a deceleration of the time that it takes to authenticate a user and the expansion of the organisation's attack surface. So I cannot thank Wade enough for coming on and talking about that fragmented infrastructure which results in a sprawl, why digital transformation has exacerbated the current identity management problem, and how they can identify data fabric to solve this identity sprawl problem that we've been talking about. Because, hey, I'm a solutions, not problems kind of guy. But over to you. I'd love to hear your stories, experiences, and questions and pictures to come on the show, whatever it is. techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, just at Neil C. Hughes, nice and easy there. And my website is techblogwriter.co.uk if a daily podcast isn't enough and you'd like to work with me too. So I hope you enjoyed this one. I'll be back again tomorrow. I've got another guest lined up. So thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.